Hello and welcome. My name is Alex Moore, and the name of this session is Transformative Thinking, Teaching Social Justice Issues Through Mathematical Inquiry. And I just want to start by thanking you for being here and taking a few minutes to learn about something that I'm very passionate about. So let's go ahead and start out by looking at the PowerPoint slides, and I'll tell you exactly where you can get these. This website right here, this URL, alexmath.org/pd18, is where everything for this talk is going to be located. My email address is right here, ASM, it's my initials, Alexander S. Moore, ASM@alexmath.org, and you can feel free to email me there. So we'll get started by looking at this actual website. So if you just come to your browser of choice, and I see up here in the browser bar I've typed in alexmath.org/pd18 and just press enter. It'll actually bring up the website for this. We'll be using the Zoom software. The link will be here, and that will be a link to live sessions that we'll hold together. The next thing you see on the page is the registration. I would appreciate it just because this is a professional development course that you can get recertification points for. I would just ask that you fill in your name and email address right here so that I have the correct information for certifying your participation in the class and printing out your certificates. I have the right name and email address for that. So you would just put in, your name and your email or whatever it is, and then just hit submit, and that will collect your information. So if you would just do that, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So we'll go down here, and day one is listed. The little bullet points right here is everything we're going to go through. So you can start by downloading the PowerPoint slides, which will open this in Google Drive. You can download it by using this button right here, or you can simply just scroll through it on the screen. This is what we're going to be using together today. Okay, so that's where we're going to start, is with the PowerPoint slides, and that's what I have open right here. So we'll go ahead and start to click through. I just want to introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Alex. I have 5 years, going on 6 years of teaching experience. And I have kind of a unique career. I'm a middle school teacher, but I also teach at the college level, statistics, algebra, and geometry at both the middle school and college level. I have particular interest in statistics, and being a well-rounded kind of individual, I also appreciate applied math and applied statistics. And so one of the things that I have gravitated towards in my professional career is using statistics in engaging ways with students, and one of the things that I have kind of specialized in over the past few years is inquiry-based learning. And I think that a lot of social issues lend themselves to inquiry-based learning, and particularly statistics, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is basically how we use statistics to engage students in authentic learning experiences, particularly for social justice issues. So let me just get your name and email if you haven't already done that on the registration form. And we're going to do a little inquiry lesson right now. If you look under the website, you'll look under today's date and you'll see two files, WSJ Inquiry Text and WSJ Inquiry Graphs. So let's go back and look at that. They're right here. If I click on the text, actually I'm going to just do a command click to get two different windows open. So I'm going to open the text and I'll open the graphs. And you see I have two different tabs open here. So what this is going to do, this is an inquiry lesson, and so the way that an inquiry lesson is structured is I give you some information, and then it is your job to kind of investigate that information by just asking questions. And I'm on purpose not giving you lots of extra information or telling you lots of things. So all I'm going to give you is this document here, which is a Wall Street Journal article. And this is all text, as you can see. This is just all text here. And the other document is a bunch of graphs, as you can see here. I can even scroll out like this, and this is just a bunch of graphs, just one right after the other. And so what you're going to do now is use this article and this set of graphs, and you are going to, and I am a a Wall Street Journal subscriber, so I'm using this under my personal, subscription to the newspaper. And so I would like for you to read the article and use the graphs and try to make sense out of it. And so I'm going to stop the recording here. I want you to stop the recording and see if you can do that in about 15 minutes. That's all the time I think we need to spend on this. So you'll have about 15 minutes, and then you can unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Okay? Okay, so I hope that you had some time to pause the video and work on the inquiry lesson. So let's talk about what happened here. You see the article, and it talks about the divide between America's prosperous cities and struggling small towns in 20 charts. And so what I've done here is I've taken this article, which I got from from the Wall Street Journal in December, and the graphs were intermingled into the text as it would be, on a professional publication. And so what I did was I pulled the graphs out of the publication, out of the article, and just reset the text just like it is. So this is the way that the text would flow normally in the article. And then I took all of the graphs and I just basically moved them from the article over to their own individual file. And so now you have all of the graphs and all of the text, and they're separated from each other. And that's the problem that we're going to try to get at today is repairing and understanding what the article is saying, which is the article is very conversational, right? It's very colloquially written, as an article would be in a newspaper. And so it does not directly translate to figure 1 says this, figure 2 says this, etc. And so what the point of the inquiry project is to read the article and then have to gain a detailed understanding of these graphs so that you can go back through and understand how the graphs are used in the actual article and how they took information that is graphically displayed here and turned it into a narrative that they used for the article. This is an important and yet abstract statistics skill, and it is an important part of understanding statistics. And this is, in its essence, a guided, or essentially a structured, I guess, somewhere between guided and structured inquiry lesson. And so we're going to talk about the rest of what inquiry is right now. So once you've tried to do the activity yourself, how did you approach it? Why did you do it that way? We can have a few minutes here to discuss that. What do you already know about inquiry? What is your prior knowledge? Why does inquiry lend itself to social justice education? Talk and think about these questions for a couple of minutes. Okay, now that I hope you have discussed those two questions, I would like to just add my own thoughts on that. Of course, I'm very passionate about inquiry as a teaching style, and I know a lot about it. That's why I'm happy to be sharing it with you today. I think that it lends itself to social justice education because inquiry is about an authentic discovery of existing truths. And most of the time, when we are learning about a social justice issue for the first time, we are approaching it from a place of ignorance. Otherwise, we would probably already know something about it. And so if we're learning about a social justice issue, we are actually, in our human nature, we are approaching it from a place of inquiry because we do not know about the topic and we want to learn about it. And oftentimes, if we don't understand a social justice topic, it's because it does not directly impact us in our own personal lives. And so therefore, I would argue that you can't know a social justice issue unless it truly affects you. It's kind of like, we have the vision of politicians that are disconnected from their people because they do not live the lives of their constituents. And so I would kind of, underscore that as the same idea here. And so I would argue that if you truly want to learn a social justice topic, you need to approach it from a place of inquiry so that you may, in fact, learn a little bit of an authentic nature of it rather than just reading something on the internet or reading something on Wikipedia or following a couple of news links on Facebook and then proclaiming yourself to be an expert. And so I like to approach it this way, especially with students, because then it provides an authentic context for them to learn about social justice issues and hopefully will instill a sense of responsibility in them, that they leave the class feeling empowered and responsible for taking action on things that they feel particularly strongly about or particularly opinionated about. And that's the kind of action that we need to be getting out of our students once they have left our classrooms. And so I'd like to stop now, and we're going to watch about a 20-minute video from Zoe Weil. And so if you've never heard of Zoe Weil, she's a really excellent educator and speaker, and as a what she calls a humane educator, where she approaches traditional kind of college degree programs, but approaches them from a more humane perspective, thinking about global perspectives and how they play into that field of discipline, and what are the humane implications that may be overlooked in a more traditional setting. And so I would like to play this video now. We can pause the video and just click on this YouTube link that's right there. The name of the video is "The World Becomes What You Teach." And then just pause the video here. Once you watch the Zoe Weil's video, you can come back to this video and begin it again. So we'll pause the video here. The video by Zoe Weil takes about 20 minutes, and I'll see you back in about 20 minutes. Okay, so now we've watched the Zoe Weil video, and we'll move on to the next part of the Transformative Thinking PD talk. Let's now talk about the structure of an inquiry lesson. An inquiry lesson basically follows an arc of 3 steps. Number 1 is to formulate a testable question. A testable question is, as its name probably implies, that is a question that can be tested through investigation. It is not an opinion, and it is not a question that is kind of unapproachable with your resources at hand. I may have a question about outer space, but I certainly wouldn't be able to go investigate that, pretend it's an original question or some very abstract kind of a thing that I want to know about. The answer is probably available, or I could probably investigate it if I had the right equipment, or if I went to a university somewhere that has radio telescopes and things of that nature, and astrophysicists to interpret things and to help me understand things. But I don't have that available to me right now or in the near future. And so what I would want is to be able to ask a question that I could actually test within the time frame. If your context is a 50-minute class period, or maybe an hour-and-a-half block period, or over a series of a few blocks, things that are actually testable within your context and within your limits. I'm not saying that it's impossible for me to go to an astrophysics lab and talk to people who do that for a living. I'm just saying that it might be impossible for me this afternoon, or within the time frame that I have students, or that I can commit to this question. I may not want to spend a whole week on it. I may want to spend just 2 days on it. So the question has to be testable within the context that you want the lesson to be, and it also has to be something that can be investigated and it's not opinion based. I would also note that a lot of testable questions may be structured as yes or no questions. As a practice, a best practice in my classroom, I don't allow students to use yes or no questions, not because they may not be testable, but just because they're not usually very interesting. As yes or no questions tend to be very closed, and once you find the yes or no answer, you have less of a desire to dig further. And so if a student has a good question that is formulated as a yes or no question, I usually help them restructure it into something that is not a yes or no question, that may be more open, and that would allow them to investigate further once they have their yes or no answer. So step number 1 is formulating a testable question. Step number 2 is to determine methods and procedure to investigate that question, and then of course carry out the investigation. And so now you have your question, you can investigate it, and number 3 is, once you've investigated, you have to communicate your results to the rest of the class or to the rest of your peers or whatever your setting is. Notice that nowhere in this list is a step that says determine a solution or determine an answer. As we know, as mathematicians, we are not always led to an answer. You know, the desired product of something may be a process. It may be multiple steps that you want to see in a particular order, or it may be a thinking process that you want to see, or some kind of a graphical representation, and it may not just be a number or some kind of a nice little thing that you can box in and say, okay, there's my answer. So trying to arrive at an answer is not part of the inquiry process, because you don't always know if you'll be able to find an answer or know that you've found an answer, because you are asking your own question. And so, you know, most questions, if you think in the long run, you probably could find an answer to every question a student might have. But again, in the context of everything, in the context of our current knowledge base as you know, the planet Earth, in the context of the classroom with the technology that you might have or not have, or the time limit that you may have or not have, and all of those things come together to create logistical limits to answering questions, not necessarily ultimate limits or philosophical limits, but logistical and practical limits to answering questions. And so it's very important to let the student engage in the process and the method and investigate. And if they can investigate for the sake of investigating without feeling like they are beholden to an answer that, you know, they think may exist out there, then the process and the investigation becomes much more authentic for the student. And so once they have authored their own question and authored their own process and authored their own investigation, they are proud of what they have done, even if they aren't satisfied with as far as they get. And as you know, as a researcher myself, I'm usually not satisfied with whatever I get done. I just have to say, okay, that's enough, I have to move on to something else, and then that's where I just stop. But we usually, as you know, as scientists, when we're engaged in the research process, natural scientists or social scientists, same way, you usually aren't fully satisfied with the amount of research you've done. You just reach a limit where it becomes practically and logistically prohibitive to carry on because you have to take your project to the next step, right? And so that's really how we like to let inquiry be limited and be governed, rather than being governed by this idea of finding an answer that pre-exists. And so that's what I really want to impress on you right now, is that the spirit of inquiry is not finding the answer. The spirit of inquiry is asking an authentic question and then engaging in an authentic investigation. And you know, and then because we don't necessarily limit ourselves to some preconceived answer for a question, it's important to communicate the process. It's important to communicate to our peers what we have done, and what we were able to find, and what we would like to try to find next, and what we were dissatisfied with finding, because all of that discussion and dialogue is so critical to true research in the natural world and in the social world. And so in order to start this process, students are presented with a prompt similar to in a writing class or some type of a humanities class or literature class, and you are writing. You're presented with a writing prompt, and that writing prompt is designed to prompt your writing. And so for inquiry, we similarly have inquiry prompts, and that inquiry prompt is simply to prompt the inquiry process to start. And I like to think of it as this discrepant event. A prompt creates a discrepant event in the mind of the student, a mental state where the student is going, "What? I don't understand this. I don't understand what this is about." And I even heard one speaker once, an educator speaker at a conference, say that it's kind of like creating a headache and then giving the aspirin later. So I like to think of this as creating the headache, and then the process and the investigation is the aspirin that alleviates the headache, of course. And so inquiry comes in three different flavors, if you will: structured, guided, and open. And I said earlier that the Wall Street Journal activity was somewhere in between a structured and a guided inquiry lesson. And structured and guided, I say that because the purpose of the activity was somewhat clear. It was obvious that I had given you, even without giving you the introduction that I did to it, if I had just handed you the files and said, "This is a lesson, go do it," you know, you would have eventually figured out that, oh, this story, this article is related to these graphs, and you would naturally, the natural human inclination would be to try to decipher, or I guess you could say re-cipher, the graphs to the text. And so that's why I say that it's somewhere in between structured and guided, because what is the responsibility of the student here? In a structured lesson, the student is responsible for just communicating the findings, because the teacher has provided the question or the impetus for doing the project, and has also provided the methods and procedure. And it's fairly obvious that I've given you the methods and procedure because I gave you all of the story. The only difference with a guided lesson is that the student takes over responsibility for step 2. And notice that in an open lesson, which is a very literally open-ended prompt, the student has responsibility for all 3 steps. So I would like you to just take a moment and think about why the lesson we just did was somewhere between a guided and a structured inquiry lesson. Okay, so just pause the video for a second and think about why the Wall Street Journal activity we just did was in between structured and guided. I just want to note one more thing now that we've had a chance to think back on the Wall Street Journal activity, is that a structured inquiry lesson can loosely be thought of as a project. Normally when we think of like doing a project in class, they are more than not, you could roughly correlate that to a structured inquiry lesson. or some kind of a traditional active learning activity in a class. Those are usually somewhere in the structured inquiry family of things, even though you may not have thought of that. Okay, I note here today's lesson was guided. Tomorrow we'll be doing another one at the end of class. I have it marked as tomorrow because of the 2-day setup of this talk. Tomorrow's will be structured, just as a note here. So now let's talk about how to transform your thinking. How to take a social justice topic and turn it into an inquiry lesson. Well, first you have to identify the topic. When you see a news article, think about the true cost activity that by Zoe Weil. And I really like that video because of the true cost activity. What is the true cost behind blank? And think about that. What mathematics or statistics are behind the topic? It is regular. You know, I have my smartphone and I have my little news app on here that just pushes news articles to me, and it is weekly, at least weekly, where an article pops up, and usually even more than that, 3 to 4, almost even daily, that an article pops up, some news article pops up, and I look at the title, just the headline, and I go, wow, that would be great for an inquiry lesson, because you start to see the headline excuse me, and what lies behind it, and what the mathematics or statistics are that would be behind that topic. And then after that, after you've identified the topic and what math or statistics may be lying behind the headlines, you need to design the prompt. Most of them for this type of application of inquiry, going with like a social justice statistics kind of flavor, most of these will be guided or structured level, like the ones we're doing in this particular PD. It needs to be, when you design a prompt, it needs to not comfortably be within the reach of a student's prior knowledge. Thus, that will create the discrepant event when the student is handed the prompt. But they should be able to pull on prior knowledge to begin thinking about the prompt. You don't want to give them something that is so outside of their knowledge base that they just are completely confused and don't even know what to do, and are so off-put by the whole thing that they just, are not engaged. So it's balancing a prior knowledge base with this kind of discrepant event where you know that you're going to be creating a bit of confusion, a bit of wonder, a bit of interest. Those are the kinds of things that we want to strike up in the student when they are beginning an inquiry task. And let's try it together. I want you to just follow along with this. Go to your favorite news outlet online, or on a smartphone app or iPad or whatever you have that you like to consume your news, and whatever your preferred news outlet is. I'd like you to go there and look for articles that catch your eye. And I want you to do the true cost activity with those articles and then think about the mathematics behind it. And that will usually lead you to a good type of activity to start with, to start designing your prompt. And so once you do that, and you can try this out now, we'll pause the video. I want you to have an example to share, and I want you to remember the news article is your prompt for designing the prompt, right? It is your prompt. It's prompting you. The news article is prompting you to create, to envision, to author the rest of the lesson and the lesson prompt that you'll be sharing with your students. If you're having trouble coming up with an idea, you can click this link in the corner of the PowerPoint slide. Just some ideas from another blog that I really like called Radical Math. Jonathan Osler is the guy responsible for that page, and he's really good. He's got some great ideas in this little chart that you can download by clicking on that link. So we'll just pause here for a couple minutes, and I want you to try to do this. Go to your news outlet, look for an article, do the true cost activity on the news article, and think and try to really brainstorm about what math and statistics is hiding behind that news article. Okay, so we'll come back in a few minutes. And now that we've come back from doing the true cost on an article from our news outlet, I'd like to just talk about testable questions for a moment. I hope that you were able to find something and are hopefully able to start to see how much material is out there for designing a project like this. So as far as testable questions go, if you can design an experiment or investigation to attempt to answer the question, then it's testable. Yes or no questions, like I said before, are generally testable, but they aren't very interesting. Start with an I wonder statement. Based on what the student finds interesting about the prompt, you may want to ask them, if they're having trouble finding or stating a testable question, you may want to have them start with an I wonder statement. What seems interesting about the prompt? And say, oh, I wonder this and this. And then say, oh, well, that's your question. You can reword that kind of, or twist that around into a question, and then they have a question and they can move on with their process. Doing it this way yields an initial method to using skills in their prior knowledge base, because if they are saying that they wonder something, they're building that, they're constructing that wonder off of things that they are familiar with in the past. And this real question becomes clearer since they are verbalizing it. And then after that, they're actually ready to start the investigation. So that is why the question is important, is because it becomes the anchor for the investigation itself. So for your assignment for this PD, you're going to be designing your own inquiry lesson that addresses a social justice topic, and hopefully you were able to find an article that would be a good fit for this from the activity we did just a few slides ago, and then the idea is you can take that and you can develop it into a full inquiry lesson, and then have me look over it and provide comments and feedback back to you. You can use whatever template or form for an inquiry for a lesson plan that you use or are comfortable with or is mandated by your school. Any of that is fine, and these are due to me tomorrow at 6 p.m. and I'll return them back to you the next day with comments. So now let's move on to the second day's worth of material. I'd like to just stop for a moment here and debrief from your previous week. So you've been working on this for a week, and when you think about inquiry and this social justice inquiry approach to news, what do you think about this? What do you think about it in theory? What do you think about it for implementation into your classroom? Is it too pie in the sky? Is it not realistic enough? Do you think that it's not focusing on the mathematics as much as it should be? Do you think that it's the most brilliant thing you've ever heard of? I want to know what you think about. And so if you would please just send me an email with some of your thoughts. That would be very, very helpful to me to learn how I can become a better instructor on topics like this. So I would really appreciate it if you would send me an email with that. So we're going to start our next phase of material here by going into breakout groups. This will be for about 40 minutes, which is a lot, but I have two small inquiry lessons we're going to do together. The materials are back at the website, so if you just go to that website again, alexmath.org/PD18, and what it's going to look like is this file right here. We are going to open, and it will have 2 lessons in it. We'll go over them briefly together. As soon as Microsoft Word decides to open, give me just a second, I'll make sure that everything's going to open on this. So I got it pulled up here. This is what it looks like. The first page is the first inquiry lesson on black voter disenfranchisement. And so I have this histogram here and some questions, and then the second page is going to be poverty levels by state, or rather percent of population that is poor, below the poverty line, and these are listed by each state here. And so your task is to make a histogram from this data and then answer these questions. And note that you should decide how many groups to divide the data into. Be sure to make sure that each group has the same range. And so you can see the parallelism between these two activities, but that they are complementary in their task nature. And so I'd like for you to just take about 40 minutes and go through these. So I hope you've now been able to do the 2 mini lessons, and note that they were structured inquiry lessons. If you remember our talk from last time about the 3 levels of inquiry, and I just take a minute if you'd like and convince yourself that those are structured. They're both structured lessons because the questions were given to you literally in a list. The questions were given to you, and so it was a structured lesson. It also was a good example of why I was saying last time that in many cases, kind of traditional active learning activities or projects could be also thought of as a structured inquiry lesson. So now that we're back together, I'd like to brainstorm ideas for future lessons. So let's take a couple minutes and brainstorm ideas for lessons that you would like to design, or things that you noticed this week that you thought, oh, that might be a good thing to approach like this. So we'll talk about that for just a minute. You can pause the video. And now that we've discussed brainstorming ideas for future lessons, I want to ask, how will this PD affect you in your teaching practice? Do you think, I've presented some good ideas? Do you see yourself using it? Do you not see yourself using it? Do you see yourself improving on it? I would love for you to send me an email and explain to me your thoughts on that as well. And lastly, I just want to mention my vision for the future. I believe that part of our job as educators is to positively impact the next generation. And if we're just teaching mathematics for the sake of mathematics, we're really missing out on a large part of our responsibility to humankind. That we are teaching students what they know. We're literally giving them their knowledge. And so if we give them knowledge that enables them to see the world in a more equitable way, then it provides the basis and the grounding for a more equitable future, I would hope. And that's really my goal in trying to spread this message about this type of approach to lesson design in mathematics. My hope is that we make the world better, and we actually take steps to do that, because we will only see changes that we make. It seems simple, but it is true. If we expect change to happen, then we have to do the change, because if we don't, then who will? And I'd like to just close out with an idea here: solutionary mathematics. I'm borrowing the term from Zoe Weil because I like it so much. I like the imagery so much. Solutionary mathematics. We're talking about graduating students who are solutionaries in their use of mathematics. They use their mathematics to come up with solutions. We teach students to be critical thinkers, critical news consumers, critical citizens. This is important today. It's important to be able to consume all the information that we have available to us through the internet and consume it in a responsible way, responsible to our own health, but also to the health of others, and to the betterment of the community, and to the health of the world, and the health of the planet, and the health of the environment, and all the animals that we share our planet with. And so being able to teach students to be solutionaries in their lifetime through the use of mathematics and other fields as well, through the use of law, through the use of language, through the use of technology and computers, and all of these things that we are on the advent of right now, and so much information is being exchanged, and technological advances are just happening at an increasingly exponential rate. And so being able to use those things to construct solutions for things in the world rather than construct things that simply better our checkbooks and our bank accounts, but not necessarily the planet. I think that's a very important task for us in our generation and for the 21st century. Students who become solutionaries in mathematics are positive contributors to their world and the community, and they understand how mathematics and statistics is so relevant to everything and everyone. Things that mathematicians see and things that we know, we already know that. But not everybody, not every student is going to be a mathematician, which I'm very thankful for, because a lot of times I wonder, how practical this field really is. And then I remember, oh yes, but we are the ones that are actually crunching the numbers to come up with solutions and figure out what's reasonable and what's not. And in order to really communicate an authentic respect for mathematics and statistics to our students, we have to embrace the fact that not every student is going to be a math whiz or going to be even excited about math. Even if they are good at math and they can get the right answer every time and can calculate everything right, and they're perfectly good math students, they may not really be interested in math. But if you can tie it into something else that they're interested in by showing them the interconnectedness of things and the way that mathematics literally applies to everything, no matter what you're doing, and it applies to all of the solutions that we're going to need in the world. If you can communicate that kind of authentic understanding and respect for mathematics and statistics to your students, then they will walk away with at least a basic respect and an understanding of the relevance and the context for mathematics within the framework of what they are interested in the world. And this is how the next generation is going to see mathematics as actually being culturally relevant to themselves. And I think that that is really the beauty in our jobs as educators, and specifically mathematics educators, is because we have the power to change this narrative. This traditional stale narrative about what mathematics is in the classroom, and present it in a more innovative way that provides a relevant context and a modern context to our students, while still maintaining all of the traditional rigor and thoroughness and system that is so strong and so robust in mathematics study. So I hope that you have really enjoyed this time. And if you have any questions for me, please feel free to email me. My email address is right here on the bottom right hand corner, asm@alexmath.org, and I would love to hear from you and strike up a conversation. So please feel free to email me, and refer back to the website page for the resources in the future. I will leave it there. So thanks so much again, and as I said at the beginning, I'm Alex, and I'm so glad that you spent the last 42 minutes or so with me. Thank you.